The summer of 2003 in the quiet suburb of Harlan, Ohio, was marked by an unsettling tension that no one could fully articulate at the time. Residents went about their routines, children played on cracked sidewalks, and neighbors waved to one another across lawns. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythms of daily life, an unspoken anxiety lingered. It was the kind of subtle unease that comes from the unknown, the kind that gnaws at a community when a young girl vanishes without explanation. That girl was Natalie Reynolds, a vibrant 12-year-old, with a laugh that could fill a room and a curiosity that often led her to explore the neighborhood beyond what her parents, Margaret and David, were comfortable with. Her disappearance in late July sent shockwaves through the community, rippling across the town in ways that would last for decades. From the moment Natalie was reported missing, local law enforcement swung into action. Officers conducted neighborhood canvasses, interviewed friends, family, and school staff, and examined any potential leads. Despite their diligent efforts, every trail seemed to run cold within days. The police department, though professional and methodical, faced the constraints of 2003 investigative technology. DNA testing existed, but was not as advanced as it would become years later. Computers were slower, and databases were far less comprehensive. This limitation, combined with the lack of witnesses who had seen anything unusual, meant that the investigation stalled, and Natalie's case quietly transitioned into the realm of cold cases for Margaret and David Reynolds. Every day that passed without news intensified a unique form of psychological torment, grief mingled with guilt and a desperate need for answers. Human psychology shows that parents of missing children often experience prolonged trauma characterized by hypervigilance, chronic anxiety, and persistent intrusive thoughts. Margaret, who had always been the organized one, found herself checking her house repeatedly, imagining scenarios, and replaying every detail of Natalie's last known movements. David, more practical by nature, focused on timelines and logical possibilities, attempting to impose order on an inherently chaotic situation. Together, they formed a fragile but necessary alliance, balancing emotion and reason in the face of incomprehensible uncertainty. Over the years, Harlan continued to live with the shadow of Natalie's disappearance. Neighborhood routines subtly shifted. Parents watched their children more closely, and strangers were met with suspicion. Local schools implemented stricter policies for student safety, and community meetings frequently addressed concerns about missing children and abductions. Though the case remained unsolved, Natalie's story remained present, woven into the fabric of the town's collective consciousness. Residents experienced a phenomenon common in small towns affected by unresolved trauma, the blend of fear, curiosity, and collective hope that someone, somewhere, would finally provide closure. It wasn't until nearly 15 years later, in the fall of 2018, that a breakthrough emerged. Detective Laura Benson, who had joined the Harlan Police Department in 2015, was assigned to review cold cases as part of a newly formed cold case unit. Benson, an expert in both forensic investigation and behavioral analysis, approached each case with meticulous care. She understood the delicate balance between evidence and psychology, recognizing that the key to solving long-dormant cases often lay in patterns of human behavior as much as in physical traces. When she reviewed Natalie Reynolds' file, she immediately noted inconsistencies in previous witness statements and gaps in the collection of physical evidence. These details, though minor at first glance, hinted at avenues that had been overlooked, not from negligence but from the technological and procedural limitations of the early 2000s. The breakthrough came when Benson revisited an evidence locker where items collected during the initial investigation had been stored. Among these items was a backpack Natalie had been carrying the day she vanished. The backpack had been catalogued but never fully processed for DNA, a step that had been constrained by technology limitations at the time. Benson ensured the sample was sent to a modern lab capable of using advanced DNA profiling and genealogical analysis, a method that had recently emerged as a powerful tool in solving cold cases. The anticipation in the department was palpable. Decades of uncertainty had built a tension that only the promise of new evidence could begin to relieve. Meanwhile, the psychological dimension of the investigation required delicate handling. Benson and her colleagues understood that the Reynolds family, though desperate for answers, could be re-traumatized by premature or inaccurate revelations. They maintained careful communication, emphasizing the methodical nature of the process and preparing them for possible outcomes. Forensic psychologists advised that managing expectations, providing emotional support, and framing potential developments responsibly were as critical as the scientific analysis itself. This combination of forensic precision and psychological insight was key to ensuring the investigation maintained both efficiency and humanity. When the lab results returned, the findings were shocking. DNA recovered from the backpack provided a certain match to a man who had lived in the neighborhood at the time of Natalie's disappearance. His identity, initially confidential, was soon confirmed as Douglas Trenton, a man with a long history of minor offenses but no prior record of violent crime. The revelation that someone so familiar to the neighborhood could be implicated created an immediate ripple of fear and disbelief. Psychology explains this reaction. When individuals are confronted with the betrayal of trust by someone within their social circle, the sense of violation can be profound, often leaving lasting impacts on perceptions of safety and community cohesion. Benson's team began the process of gathering corroborating evidence to ensure a solid case. Investigators examined surveillance footage, interviewed neighbors who had observed unusual behaviors, and cross-referenced historical records to identify patterns consistent with predatory activity. Each step was taken carefully, cognizant that the decades-long delay made recollections imperfect and that the suspect's behavior had likely changed over the years. The accumulation of circumstantial evidence, combined with the compelling DNA match, allowed investigators to construct a clear and actionable narrative. As the investigation gained momentum, the psychological pressure on the community intensified. Rumors circulated, speculation spread, and media outlets began covering the emerging details. Residents who had once gone about their lives without incident now revisited past events with heightened scrutiny. Some recalled encounters or observations that had previously seemed innocuous but now took on a darker significance. Benson and her team managed communications carefully, understanding that maintaining public order and preventing hysteria was as important as pursuing justice for Natalie. The community's collective memory, reshaped by new information, became both a resource and a challenge for law enforcement, demonstrating how human cognition and social dynamics interplay with criminal investigations. The culmination of months of work came in the spring of 2019. Trenton was arrested in a coordinated operation that respected both legal protocols and community safety. The arrest was executed quietly to minimize public alarm, but the news quickly spread, confirming suspicions long held and fears that had lingered in the community's consciousness for 16 years. For the Reynolds family, the arrest marked the beginning of a complicated emotional journey. Relief was tempered by the resurgence of trauma, as memories of the loss and the long years of uncertainty resurfaced. The balance between justice served and emotional healing became a central concern for both family and investigators, illustrating the enduring psychological complexities inherent in cold cases. The story of Natalie Reynolds and the arrest of Douglas Trenton underscores the evolving nature of criminal investigation. Advances in DNA technology, coupled with an understanding of human behavior, allowed law enforcement to solve a case that had eluded resolution for over a decade and a half. The human element, the psychology of fear, memory, and trauma, was as crucial as any scientific breakthrough. Investigators recognized that understanding behavior patterns, social interactions, and community dynamics provided critical insights that could guide the collection and interpretation of evidence. The integration of these disciplines exemplifies the modern approach to cold cases, methodical, compassionate, and informed by both science and human understanding, even as the legal process prepared to unfold. The community of Harlan faced the task of reconciling the past with the present. Memories of Natalie, both painful and cherished, were brought into focus. Public meetings, memorials, and informal conversations became part of the town's healing process. Psychologists emphasize that collective acknowledgement of trauma, along with validation of emotional experiences, is essential in restoring a sense of safety and cohesion in communities affected by violent crimes. For Harlan, the resolution of Natalie's case became both a closure and a catalyst for reflection on how vigilance, awareness, and community solidarity could protect future generations. The trial itself would delve further into the human psyche, examining not only the actions of the perpetrator, but also the impact on those left behind. Investigators anticipated that understanding Trenton's motives, behaviors, and psychological profile would be crucial in presenting a coherent and compelling case to the court. The integration of forensic science and behavioral analysis, a hallmark of Benson's approach, aimed to ensure that justice was a comprehensive act, acknowledging the facts, the law, and the profound human consequences of crime. The arrest of Douglas Trenton did not immediately answer every question about Natalie Reynolds' disappearance, but it reopened old wounds and sparked a wave of reflection throughout Harlan, Ohio. The community had spent nearly 16 years living with uncertainty, and the sudden revelation that a familiar neighbor could be responsible shook the foundations of trust. Psychologists studying communities affected by long unsolved crimes note that the sudden exposure of a perpetrator often generates a complex blend of relief, fear, and renewed anxiety. People struggle to reconcile their memories of ordinary interactions with the horrific reality that someone they knew had committed such an act. For Harlan, these feelings manifested in conversations on porches, quiet meetings at schools, and late-night discussions among parents who once believed their streets were entirely safe. Detective Laura Benson, who had orchestrated the arrest, understood that solving a case did not end the psychological journey for the community or the family. She worked closely with social workers and forensic psychologists to prepare the Reynolds family for what lay ahead in the legal process. Margaret and David, though relieved that a suspect had been apprehended, experienced a resurgence of grief that was both emotional and physical. Sleep disturbances, intrusive memories, and persistent anxiety were constant companions. Human psychology research demonstrates that the sudden reopening of trauma can trigger intense emotional reactions, even years after an event. For the Reynolds family, counseling sessions became a critical tool for maintaining emotional stability, providing a structured environment in which their feelings could be processed safely. Meanwhile, investigators focused on consolidating evidence to build an airtight case against Trenton. They revisited every detail from the original 2003 investigation, re-interviewing witnesses whose memories had faded but whose recollections might now offer new perspectives. One neighbor, for instance, remembered seeing Trenton near the park when Natalie was last seen, an observation she had dismissed at the time as irrelevant. Behavioral experts emphasize that memory can be selective and influenced by time, but when multiple accounts converge, patterns emerge that are vital in reconstructing events. These interviews, carefully documented and cross-referenced, began to paint a detailed picture of Trenton's movements and interactions leading up to Natalie's disappearance. The forensic team continued its work on DNA and trace evidence. Advances in technology since 2003 allowed for more precise analysis, including the identification of microscopic particles that had been impossible to process 15 years earlier. Fibers, hair, and biological material that had been stored in evidence lockers were re-examined, and modern methods confirmed the initial DNA findings. Each piece of evidence was cross-verified with Trenton's profile, establishing a narrative that tied him directly to Natalie on the day she vanished. Forensic psychologists emphasized that presenting evidence in a narrative form that aligns with human cognition improves juror understanding and engagement, ensuring that complex technical details do not overshadow the emotional and factual core of the case. As the investigation unfolded, a new layer of complexity emerged when forensic accountants and behavioral analysts reviewed Trenton's personal history. Patterns of obsessive behavior, social isolation, and prior minor offenses suggested a progression toward more serious crimes. Behavioral profiling indicated that Trenton may have targeted Natalie due to specific vulnerabilities, including her age, her tendency to explore beyond supervised areas, and his familiarity with the neighborhood routines. Understanding these psychological dynamics was crucial not only for the court case, but also for educating the community about the nature of predatory behavior. Public safety campaigns emphasized vigilance without fostering paranoia, teaching residents to recognize warning signs while reinforcing collective trust. Meanwhile, the media began extensive coverage of the case. National outlets were drawn to the story because it highlighted the power of modern forensic technology and the resilience of families navigating unresolved trauma. Journalists carefully documented the timeline from Natalie's disappearance to Trenton's arrest, emphasizing the human drama without sensationalizing it. Social psychology suggests that how information is framed can significantly influence public perception, and responsible reporting aimed to respect the Reynolds family while conveying the broader implications of the case. The community's response was a mix of cautious optimism and lingering fear. Conversations in homes and coffee shops often revolved around what-if scenarios, reflecting the normal human desire to understand how such a tragedy could occur, and whether it could have been prevented in the Reynolds household. Natalie's bedroom remained largely untouched over the years, a silent monument to her absence. When news of the arrest broke, Margaret and David made the difficult decision to begin the process of going through her belongings. Each item, a school notebook, a drawing, a favorite book, evoked vivid memories, bringing moments of joy intertwined with the pain of loss. Grief, experts note, is not linear, and the return of memories can trigger intense emotional waves even after many years. Counseling sessions focused on helping the family process these emotions constructively, channeling sorrow into preparation for the legal proceedings and eventual closure. Trenton's behavior following the arrest was another crucial element for investigators and psychologists. He was cooperative but guarded, offering few verbal explanations for his actions. Experts analyzed his demeanor, nonverbal cues, and inconsistencies in his statements to anticipate strategies that might emerge in court. Profiling suggested a man who had meticulously avoided detection for years, relying on the familiarity of his environment and the assumption that small towns offered anonymity. This insight informed both the prosecution's approach and the broader understanding of human behavior in cases where offenders maintain long-term secrecy. The prosecution meticulously built its case, combining forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and behavioral analysis to establish motive, opportunity, and intent. Each element was carefully framed to ensure clarity for jurors while maintaining the gravity of the crime. Legal strategists recognize that cold cases require a balance, demonstrating the long-term impact of unresolved trauma on victims' families, emphasizing the precision of modern scientific methods, and portraying the perpetrator's calculated actions without straying into hyperbole. The trial would not merely seek conviction, it would offer a narrative of truth and accountability, restoring a sense of justice to a community long deprived of closure. As the legal process began, the emotional and psychological dimensions of the case remained at the forefront. The Reynolds family, while relieved by the arrest, continued to navigate the complex interplay of hope and fear. Sleep disturbances, recurring nightmares, and moments of emotional overwhelm were common, reflecting the deep imprint of long-term trauma. Support groups for families of missing children provided shared understanding and coping strategies, emphasizing that while the resolution of a case is vital, the journey toward healing is ongoing. Psychologists highlighted that acknowledging grief, practicing self-compassion, and creating rituals of remembrance can significantly aid emotional recovery, allowing families to honor their lost loved ones while gradually reclaiming a sense of normalcy. Community engagement also played a role in the unfolding story. Public meetings, local workshops, and educational sessions focused on child safety and community awareness became forums for dialogue and healing. Experts in community psychology noted that collective processing of trauma fosters resilience and helps prevent the transgenerational transmission of fear. Harlan's residents, once united by shared anxiety, found strength in collaboration and mutual support. The reopening of Natalie's case became a catalyst for reflection, education, and proactive community measures, demonstrating that justice is not solely a legal process, but also a social and psychological one. Despite the intense media scrutiny and legal proceedings, Detective Benson maintained a focus on the investigative principles that had guided her from the start: precision, patience, and psychological insight. She understood that every detail mattered, from the positioning of evidence to the nuances of witness recollection, and that the interplay of forensic science and human behavior was critical in constructing a coherent narrative. The meticulous nature of the work underscored a broader truth in criminal investigation. Time does not diminish the importance of details, and modern techniques can reveal truths that were once considered lost. The case also highlighted the transformative power of DNA, technology, and genealogical analysis. The ability to cross-reference genetic material with comprehensive databases created a pathway to solving crimes that had been considered unsolvable. These tools when applied alongside traditional investigative techniques, provided law enforcement with unprecedented insight into both criminal behavior and victim-offender dynamics. Importantly, the ethical application of these technologies, combined with careful consideration of psychological impact, ensured that the pursuit of justice remained human-centered rather than purely technical. As the months progressed and the trial approached, the community of Harlan grappled with a mixture of relief, apprehension, and hope. The arrest of Douglas Trenton had closed a critical chapter in the story of Natalie Reynolds, but it also opened the door to long-delayed emotional processing. Public discourse, local rituals of remembrance, and family counseling all contributed to a gradual restoration of balance and security. The case served as a stark reminder of the complexities of human behavior, the fragility of trust, and the enduring impact of unresolved trauma. The trial of Douglas Trenton brought Harlan, Ohio, to an intense period of anticipation and reflection, while the arrest itself had shocked the community. The courtroom drama tested the emotional resilience of Natalie Reynolds' family and the town at large. From the very first day, the proceedings were a careful balance of factual presentation, psychological insight, and emotional gravity. The prosecution sought not only to prove Trenton's guilt, but also to convey the depth of the impact his actions had wrought over nearly 2 decades. Psychologists note that victims' families witnessing a trial often experience a simultaneous relief and re-traumatization, as long-suppressed emotions resurface in response to detailed accounts of the crime. Margaret and David Reynolds experienced this acutely, navigating waves of grief, anger, and fragile hope as testimony unfolded. Witness testimonies played a pivotal role in reconstructing the fateful day of Natalie's disappearance. Neighbors recounted subtle observations that had seemed insignificant in 2003 but, under the lens of modern investigative techniques, formed a mosaic of evidence. One neighbor remembered hearing an unusual sound near the Reynolds yard, which had seemed mundane at the time. Another recalled seeing Trenton linger near areas where children often played, a detail previously dismissed but now resonant in hindsight. Forensic psychologists emphasize that the human brain often minimizes or dismisses peripheral events. Yet when revisited with context, these small details gain profound significance. Each testimony was cross-referenced with physical evidence, creating a coherent, compelling narrative that reinforced Trenton's presence and actions during Natalie's disappearance. The DNA evidence, central to the case, was presented in meticulous detail. Modern techniques, unavailable during the initial investigation, allowed experts to extract precise genetic material from preserved evidence. The match to Trenton was undeniable, and forensic scientists explained the process in a manner that was comprehensible to jurors while maintaining technical accuracy. Psychologists studying jury behavior note that clear, well-articulated evidence reduces cognitive overload, allowing jurors to process complex information without confusion. This approach proved crucial in ensuring that the jurors understood the gravity of the evidence while appreciating its connection to human behavior and real-world consequences. One of the most harrowing moments in the trial occurred when the prosecution reconstructed Natalie's final hours, utilizing timelines, witness accounts, and behavioral profiling. The courtroom was guided through the sequence of events leading to her abduction. This segment was emotionally charged, highlighting both Natalie's innocence and the calculated actions of Trenton. Human psychology indicates that vivid, narrative-driven reconstructions can have profound effects on juror empathy and understanding. ensuring that abstract facts are anchored in tangible human experience. The careful delivery avoided sensationalism but allowed the courtroom to fully grasp the magnitude of the crime. Trenton's defense team attempted to introduce ambiguity, suggesting inconsistencies in witness memories and questioning the reliability of long-stored evidence. However, the prosecution's strategic framing, combined with expert testimony on memory, trauma, and forensic reliability, countered these claims effectively. Behavioral psychologists testified about Trenton's manipulative tendencies and patterns of deception, providing jurors with insights into his long-term evasion of detection. The interplay between psychological analysis and hard evidence underscored the multifaceted approach necessary to solve cold cases, where technical facts and human behavior intersect in complex ways. Outside the courtroom, Harlan experienced a mixture of renewed tension and cautious optimism. Parents, who had spent years fearing for their children's safety, engaged in conversations about vigilance, trust, and the unpredictable nature of predatory behavior. Community meetings emphasized awareness without inciting fear, promoting practical strategies for monitoring children's activities while fostering a supportive neighborhood environment. Human behavior experts emphasize that communities recovering from long unresolved trauma benefit from structured dialogue and collective problem-solving, helping to transform fear into proactive engagement. Harlan's residents began creating informal safety networks, sharing contact lists, monitoring play areas, and educating children about boundaries, all in an effort to prevent similar tragedies. The Reynolds family's personal journey remained central to the unfolding narrative. With the trial underway, Margaret and David continued intensive counseling, gradually learning to separate past trauma from present reality. Techniques such as narrative therapy, mindfulness, and structured remembrance allowed them to process grief while retaining emotional stability. Margaret, in particular, found solace in writing letters to Natalie, a practice psychologists recognize as effective in processing unresolved emotions and reinforcing familial bonds despite physical loss. David, while less expressive, channeled his energy into community activism, working with local schools and child advocacy programs to turn his pain into protective action for others. As the trial progressed, subtle twists emerged. Investigators revisited other minor offenses in Trenton's history, uncovering a pattern of boundary violations and opportunistic predation. While none had escalated to the severity of Natalie's case, the pattern provided critical insight into his behavior. Forensic psychologists highlighted how individuals who commit premeditated crimes often exhibit escalating behaviors, using minor infractions to test boundaries and assess risks. This analysis not only strengthened the prosecution's narrative, but also educated the community on warning signs, promoting preventive measures against potential threats. The courtroom climax arrived when Trenton, in a moment of unexpected candor, made statements that revealed both arrogance and a fleeting acknowledgement of guilt. His demeanor suggested a man accustomed to control. Yet confronted with incontrovertible evidence, he displayed subtle cracks in composure. Experts in criminal psychology observed that such moments often emerge in long-concealed offenders, when faced with overwhelming proof, providing jurors with an authentic glimpse into the perpetrator's internal state. These insights, though subtle, contributed to a richer understanding of the motivations and psychology underlying the crime, contextualizing it within human behavioral patterns. The verdict, when delivered, brought both relief and closure. Trenton was found guilty on all counts. the jury responding not only to the technical evidence but also to the narrative of human impact presented by the prosecution. For the Reynolds family, the legal confirmation of guilt provided a sense of justice long deferred. Community members expressed a mix of relief and sorrow, acknowledging that while the perpetrator had been held accountable, the emotional scars of the past remained. Human psychology emphasizes that closure does not erase grief, but provides a framework within which it can be processed constructively. The verdict allowed Harlan's residents to reclaim a sense of safety and begin the slow, deliberate process of emotional restoration. Following the trial, structured support networks were expanded in Harlan. Educational programs on child safety, behavioral awareness, and community vigilance were implemented in schools and local organizations. Workshops offered parents practical tools for safeguarding children while maintaining trust in their neighbors, a balance essential for psychological well-being in tight-knit communities. Mental health professionals continued to work with the Reynolds family, reinforcing coping strategies and facilitating opportunities for commemoration and emotional expression. Collective resilience, experts note, is built through shared understanding, social connection, and constructive engagement with past trauma, all of which were evident in Harlan's evolving community dynamics. Reflecting on the case, Detective Laura Benson emphasized the interplay between time, technology, and human insight. The cold case had persisted for 16 years not due to negligence, but because the tools and understanding available at the time were limited. The combination of advanced DNA analysis, genealogical databases, and behavioral profiling created a pathway to resolution that earlier investigators could only hope for. Benson highlighted that the human element interviewing witnesses, understanding motivations, and predicting behavior remained as critical as any technological advancement. In essence, the case underscored the synergy between human expertise and scientific innovation, demonstrating how cold cases can be solved when both are applied rigorously and thoughtfully in private. The Reynolds family began tentative steps toward redefining normalcy. They participated in commemorative activities honoring Natalie's memory, contributed to local child safety initiatives, and gradually reintegrated their lives into routines previously disrupted by fear and grief. Psychological research notes that creating meaning from trauma, whether through advocacy, education, or personal expression, significantly enhances emotional recovery. Margaret and David, while never forgetting Natalie, found solace in turning her memory into a catalyst for positive change, channeling their pain into preventive action and communal education. Harlan itself, though forever marked by the tragedy, began to heal. Residents reported increased confidence in neighborhood safety and a strengthened sense of collective responsibility. The case had served as a stark lesson in human vulnerability but also in resilience, demonstrating that even after prolonged uncertainty, truth and justice can prevail. Schools incorporated lessons on situational awareness. Local organizations hosted community building events, and law enforcement maintained transparent communication channels to foster trust. The interplay between justice, psychology, and community engagement provided a model for other towns grappling with unresolved crimes, illustrating the holistic approach necessary to support both individuals and society. In the end, the story of Natalie Reynolds became one of perseverance, both for her family and for the broader community. The arrest and conviction of Douglas Trenton closed a painful chapter while highlighting the profound importance of combining technological innovation, investigative diligence, and deep psychological understanding For Harlan, the case reinforced the reality that even in the face of prolonged uncertainty, human insight and persistence can illuminate truth, offer justice, and begin the process of emotional healing. The memory of Natalie, preserved through love, advocacy, and remembrance, became a guiding force in shaping a safer, more attentive community, ensuring that her story would influence generations to come.